Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do thank you for this putting this together. I don't necessarily agree with the concept that we couldn't agree, and I may be wrong. Most of y'all have been here a lot longer than me. But I think what the ACLU is interested in, and what I think was maybe Professor O'Sullivan said, what the Republicans are looking, that we could all agree on it, that there's a lot of white-collar crime that shouldn't be necessarily penalized as it is, and there's a bunch of people being put away for drugs and other that shouldn't be either. And we all value liberty. That's one thing we can come together on. And taking somebody's liberty is a serious offense, and it's a costly offense, $30,000 a year. So I think we can really, I think we could work together on the policy. Professor Fairfax, you're familiar with the controlled substances schedules, I presume. Do you think they make sense?
Well, I think that as part of the project of looking at the Federal Criminal Code, a reconsideration of the controlled substances schedules would be in order. But I think that raises one of the points made earlier, that we really need to rely on expertise. And we need to supply to the committee in the Congress.
But you think there are problems with the controlled substances chart, or do you think it's all logical and
Well, not necessarily all logical, so I think that there can be differences of opinion with regard to the schedules.
Do you think marijuana should be in the same class as heroin?
Look, my mother's a pharmacist and has much greater expertise, and I've never used either substance, but I can tell you.
You don't have to use the substance.
I know, but so again,
you probably know some people have used one of the substances more than the other.
But I do think that a rational approach to making gradations among the various controlled substances and determining which substances even belong on the schedule should be part of the conversation. Yes, sir.
Professor Klein, Mr. Klein, Attorney Klein, do you have a thought about it?
First, I want to ask for immunity for Mr. Fairfax.
Don't need it.
I think the drug laws are a mess, partly because of the substantive provisions and the way different substances have been lumped in together, largely because of the mandatory minimums, which just produce these ridiculously harsh sentences and distort the whole rest of the system. Where there was discussion about plea bargaining. When a prosecutor has a mandatory minimum in his back pocket, the plea bargaining is going to take a much different form than when he doesn't, and it's going to produce, in many cases, an unjust result.
And Professor O'Sullivan, you said that you're one of the rare people that support the guidelines, and I'm against any kind of racial, ethnic, blah, blah, blah. But isn't the effect of that there's now injustice for all rather than just for most?
Well, I don't actually think so. I think if, yes, they're too harsh, but they're too harsh because the statutory maximum, they're built on the statutory maximum that Congress set. Not accusing you, but I think if Congress decided to scale down the penalties, there's nothing inevitable about the amount of time that the guidelines provide for. What I like is a structure, that there is a guaranteed set of considerations that we view as necessary to a particular sentence. It's relevant how much loss there is for fraud. And I just think judges aren't necessarily, we're all human, and you used to be, and it's now today true, that if you walked into courtroom A and this judge thought antitrust was terrible, you could get 20 years. If you walk into courtroom B and you think, this judge doesn't have a problem with it, you could get probation. And it's only subject
But as you said, we're all human, and every case has individual factors. Yeah. What if one person had a drug, marijuana,
right,
and the second person had it, and they both possessed it in the same quantity, but one person had it because their spouse was dying. And the state hadn't allowed medical marijuana, but the spouse needed it and wanted it. And the other was doing it because it made their dinner better.
Right.
Don't you think the judge should be able to distinguish in those cases?
And there were two ways you could do it under the guidelines. You could do it by looking at where within the range you should sentence people, and you could depart. And the original contemplation of the guidelines was that departures would be freely given based on offender circumstances, because offender circumstances could not be reduced to formulas the way.
Let me go to your more favorite subject. You wrote about honest services. I have to admit I haven't read your law review article, which maybe I should. Do you give proposed statute to cure the problem with honest services there?
No.
Thank you.
The
You should
gentleman's
have, yes.
time